Oh, hello there. Welcome back to the Realms of Amadeus. I'm your host, Zeko'Vutum, and today I think I'll bring you a very important story. Well, let me explain it a bit. I've been working on this story for about half a year now. I absolutely love it. The reason I created it is because, well, it is the physical representation of my love for the Alola Region. I can't express to you enough how much I care about it, so I think I'll put it in the story, and hopefully I'll get close to that. But there's also another reason I made this story. It's because of the sheer spite that I have for that fuck nugget of a trainer, Ash Ketchum. If you don't share my feelings, then oh well, that's unfortunate. But I hope that you'll enjoy this story. Suddenly, a dark-skinned woman wearing green goggles is seen standing underneath a bright spotlight. Slowly, she removes her goggles and reveals herself as Dr. Burnett of the Alola Region. She smiles widely before speaking.
My name is Melissa Burnett, and welcome one and all to the wonderful world of Pokémon. Our beloved world is a wonderful place of thriving nature, beautiful cities, and many Pokémon in which we share our lives. As you know, our society is able to thrive the way it does thanks to the help of these mysterious creatures known as Pokémon.
Dr. Burnett quickly released a Munchlax from within the dream ball she carried.
Yes, Pokémon are all around us, in the sea, in the sky, and even with us in our own towns. And those of us who train Pokémon to do battle with, we call Pokémon trainers.
She quickly shook her head in disagreeing and continued looking towards the audience.
This is the story of my darling nephew, Tarantu Burnett. There will be heartbreak, pain, sorrow, joy, and hope, all while he grows as both a trainer and a person. Thank you for your time, and we truly hope that you'll enjoy Pokémon Unbound Adventures.
Suddenly, the spotlight shuts off, and with it, Burnett and Munchlax fade from sight. The Alola Region. It is a popular resort location that attracts lots of attention from people of other regions. Unlike other places, humans and Pokemon closely coexist here, and as a result, the region's culture is greatly different from that of others. Our story begins here. On the beautiful glistening sea-bound shores of Heihei Beach, located just a few yards away from the stunning Heihei City, two individuals, a man and a woman, could be seen heading towards the shores. The woman appears to have her eyes covered by the man while they approached. She appeared to be a young woman, beautiful, a researcher also. She was known as Melissa Burnett. The man appeared to be the up-and-coming Pokemon professor known as Kai Kikui.
Kai, this is very unprofessional of you. What could possibly be so important to you that you dragged me out of my office to look at?
Burnett removed Kai's hands and faced him bearing a hilariously sour face. Kikui laughed at her priceless expression for a moment, but quickly turned her around towards the setting sun just on the horizon. She gasped in sheer amazement of it. Kai slowly placed his hands on her shoulder and pulled her close to him. It's beautiful, yeah? You're always so busy with work that you miss out on the little things of life, like that amazing Alolan sunset and sleep. Look, I'm not telling you to stop. I'm just asking if you'll let me into your life a bit more, yeah? He asked, drawing her attention and gazing calmly into her eyes. Burnett's eyes dilated the moment they came into contact with Kikui's. He pulled her by the hips slightly closer to him. As he did, she quickly found her breaths becoming hesitant and slow. Confused by this, she paused for a moment and thought.
Everything is happening so fast, but so slow at the same time. That sunset, Kai's offer, his hands on my body, and my hands on his chest. It's all so wonderful.
Melissa Burnett, will you be the light in my life? He asked, holding her hands and gazing more passionately into her eyes. Burnett blushed brightly.
Kikui, I don't know what to say. I'm speechless.
She stuttered. Slowly, she placed her hands on her racing heart and closed her eyes for a moment to take a deep breath.
Kai, I'd love to be your light.
Her eyes glistened with the beautiful light of the Alolan sunset while she gazed at Kikui. Slowly, she found that Kai's arms were embracing her. He was so warm and comforting. She closed her eyes for a moment just to savor the moment. The warming Alolan sun and gentle tides and the calming sound of Kikui's heartbeat. It was all perfect. When Burnett next opened her eyes, she calmly looked up towards Kikui. Their eyes locked once more, but grew closer and eventually closed when their tender lips connected for the first time under that near dreamy setting. A few days passed. Meanwhile, Burnett and Kikui could be seen in their separate homes. Burnett could be seen on her bed, dripping wet and dressed with only nothing but a pink bathrobe. Her hair was wrapped up, and she appears to be on the phone while attempting to keep her loose clothing together.
And that's how it happened. It all seemed magical and sudden, but enough about me. How have you been doing, sister? And how's that adorable nephew of mine?
A laugh came from her, but it quickly transitioned into a disheartened sigh. Burnett quickly took notice of her twin sister's tone and swiftly sat up on her bed asking what was wrong.
Melissa, Shiro started drinking again. I'm not sure why, but his actions are starting to scare me. With each passing day, I'm growing more concerned about Tadatsu and my safety. Even now, he's out there somewhere, probably wasted, and I can almost certainly promise you that when he comes home in the middle of the night, he's going to wake our child and throw some fruitless tantrum.
Burnett paused for a moment, speechless and in shock.
Hope, that's horrible. I wish you had told me about that sooner. Listen, I really think you should double lock the doors tonight. Maybe all Shiro needs is a night outside the house to realize how his actions are harming your family. Just do whatever you need to ensure that you and Tadatsu are safe. And if it gets any worse, promise me that you'll call the police.
Hope nodded her head and agreed with her sister Melissa.
I promise I will. And I'll give you an update of what happens tomorrow morning. It's funny. I'm always depending on you. Even while all the way here in Canton. Melissa, thank you. But let me handle this. All I ask is that you have faith in my actions. I love you, sister.
With a complete eerie pause, Hope, the elder twin sister of Melissa, ended the call. Burnett remained seemingly frozen in place with the sensation that something bad was going to happen to her sister. Elsewhere on Mele Mele Island, it appears to be twilight. The setting sun loomed off the shores with a beauty that's best described as divine. A bit ways inland could be seen a fairly large house that seems a bit damaged. Inside, the up-and-coming Pokemon Professor Kikui is seen sitting in his kitchen drawing what could be a type of costume, while Incineroar, who's eating a high-protein-based Pokemon food, is near him. Check it out, Incineroar. I think I'll call it the Nudist Royale. I'm really feeling this, yeah? 10 out of 10. What do you think, good buddy? Suddenly, Kikui stood in excitement from completing his sloppy drawing. Incineroar immediately stopped eating out of sheer cringe. He quickly snatched the drawing away from Kikui and incinerated it in front of his face. It was that bad, huh? Alright. I guess I'll work on something more a bit later, yeah? His phone suddenly began to ring in his pocket. He continued. Oh, it's Burnett. Alola. Melissa, calm down. I'm sure she's fine. Do you want me to come over? Alright, I'm on my way. Just try to stay calm. Incineroar listened curiously as Kikui talked. He immediately looked back towards his partner. Let's go, buddy. The lady's calling. It was now night, and the beautiful night sky was packed with stars. Paying them little mind, though, Kikui hurried to his boat with Incineroar and quickly headed towards Akala Island to Heihei City, where Dr. Burnett's apartment was. It wasn't until an hour later that Kikui arrived and found Burnett rushing to get her things packed. She was in tears and mumbling that she had to go. Not a single word from Kikui reached her, but it wasn't until he grabbed and hugged her that she stopped and fell to her knees in tears. Slowly, he looked her in the eyes and tried to soothe her. All the while, Incineroar leaned against a nearby wall, waiting patiently for them to finish.
Kai, I have to go to the Kanto. My sister, my nephew, they're in danger.
She cried, holding on to Kukui tightly. He softly rubbed her back and attempted to ease her before he spoke. I hear you. Look, I'm in no position to stop you. But I will go with you, yeah? We're gonna check up on your sister and make sure her and her son are alright. I'm sure they're fine, but let's get going just to be safe, alright? Incineroar watched in awe of how calm his trainer was. Meanwhile, Burnett could be seen somewhat relaxed. She thanked him by quickly kissing him on the cheek and only packing her essentials.
Kai, what about you? Do you need to pack anything?
She asked, nearly ready to walk out the front door. Kukui shook his head and told her not to worry about him, and that he'd be fine, all in an unsettling hope that her sister and nephew would be fine. A few hours passed, and with it, Burnett and Kukui could be seen on a plane heading towards the Kanto region. They were somewhere near a window seat, anxious and nervous. Burnett appears to be tightly holding Kukui's hand.
Kai, thank you for being here with me. I don't know how I'd be acting right now if you weren't keeping me somewhat calm.
I want to make sure you're safe. Come on now, we've still got a handful of time before we land. Let's try to get some sleep, yeah? As she did, Kukui lightly rubbed her hand and attempted to soothe her, all the while being concerned for the safety of her twin sister himself. About 6 hours pass and the two finally arrive in Celadon City. But from there, they quickly take a cab to Carmimi Town, to where her sister lives. Being dropped off about a block away, they grab their things and head towards what looks like the house in the distance. A sigh of relief overcame Burnett. However, she quickly realized that there were police officers standing outside, and the house was blocked off by caution tape. Burnett's heart skipped a beat, and she froze in fear for a moment. She screamed in shock, yelling her sister's name, but Kukui quickly jumped in front of her to hold her, and keep her from rushing into the house in a panic. Now overwhelmed with fear, sorrow, and desperation, she rushed towards the house and arrived at the caution tape, but before she could pass it, Kukui caught back up with her and restrained her by holding her from behind. She struggled to get away from him, while crying out to her sister, hoping that she would answer.
Kai, let me go! Can't you see she needs me? Oh, my little sister, she needs me! Kai, please!
She yelled, suddenly being pulled into a loving embrace by the now teary-eyed Kukui. I know, Melissa. I know. Let it out. I'll let you cry on me for as long as you need. The two fell to their knees, holding one another and crying on each other. After a few minutes passed, the two were approached by police and investigators who quickly identified Burnett as the twin sister of the victim and provided her with a report.
Well, according to what we discovered, the victims were Hope Burnett and her child, Tarantu Burnett. Hope received multiple stab wounds to the lower stomach, while Tarantu may have only experienced some form of head trauma. We can escort you to the hospital they were taken to earlier this morning. I'm sure the staff there can give you a better diagnosis of the situation.
It didn't take long before they had arrived at the hospital and were taken to just outside the patient's room. They were approached by a woman who had vital information on the victims. The doctor looked into her eyes with sorrow.
Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we did everything we could for your sister. But unfortunately, the stab wounds she received were simply too much for her to overcome. She died upon transportation here. However, we did manage to save the child. Please, can I go see my nephew? He means the world to me, and is the only family I have left.
Dr. Joy immediately stepped aside and allowed her inside. She thanked her and asked Kukui to give her a bit of time alone. Upon entering, the first thing she noticed was a stunning view of the Kanto region's Indigo Plateau, stretching high into the air not far off into the distance. She paid this little mind, though, and immediately looked to her left and noticed the hospital bed in which her nephew, Tarantu L. Burnett, was unconscious. She rushed to his side and held his hand, crying and falling to her knees as she did. She lightly stroked the side of his dark-skinned face with the back of her hand and gently leaned in to kiss his forehead. She slowly brought herself back up to look at him. Trying her best to ignore the countless machines hooked up to him, she lightly rubbed his forehead and carefully avoided the bandages there. His white hair, that seemed similar to Brunette's, was just slightly covered in his own blood, and the sight of that alone caused more tears to rush from her eyes. She lowered her head once again, but suddenly felt a light thud on her forehead. She immediately looked up and noticed him faintly smiling at her.
Mommy, please stop crying. You told me to be strong, but I can't be strong if you're sad.
He faintly said, passing out again. Brunette's eyes widened, and she cried even louder than before. Her heart ached in pain and realization that Tadantsu had developed memory loss. She cried, grabbing his hand and kissing it gently.
You don't remember, do you? You shouldn't remember what happened last night. It's far too much for you to bear anyway. Take as long as you need to recover. I don't care about you calling me mommy, just as long as you're alive. That's all that matters to me. I love you, Tadantsu. And from now on, I'll be the one who keeps you safe. I promise.
After a few hours passed, Kikui was allowed to enter. He approached the unconscious Tadantsu's bedside to where Brunette sat, watching and waiting for him to awaken. This is my first time seeing him. He might not be in the best condition right now. The two of you look pretty darn gender switched. It's a little scary, yeah? All jokes aside, it's getting late. I rented us a room at a nearby hotel. Visiting hours are almost up, and I really don't want to see you being kicked out of this place.
You're right, Kai. Thank you. Let's get going. Tadantsu, I love you. I'll be back tomorrow.
Brunette exhaled loudly before standing. She said, kissing him on the forehead and leaving with Kikui. A while later, upon entering their surprisingly stunning hotel room, Incineroar burst out of his Pokeball and rolls around on their queen-size bed.
Incineroar always seems so energetic when moods aren't so high. Honestly, I like that about him. He's such a character.
Brunette said with a giggle in her voice. Incineroar quickly blushed at this and fell to his butt in pain. 10 out of 10, thanks, good buddy. But could you give us some privacy, please? Kikui asked, watching as Incineroar returned to his Pokeball.
Kai, I have something important to tell you. It's about Tadantsu. Well...
Brunette said, looking towards him with a serious stare. Kikui nodded in understanding and simply prepared to listen.
Well, I've taken full custody of him. From now on, he'll legally be my responsibility. That means he'll be coming back with me to the Alola once this is all over. I just hope it's really soon.
Kikui removed his hat for a moment and looked at her with a faint smile. You say that like I'm not committed to staying here with you until he gets better.
But Kai, he's my responsibility. You don't have to be here doing this with me.
This shocked Brunette. She paused and became hesitant to speak. Kikui stood from the bed and immediately hugged Brunette tightly. He lightly began to speak while gazing into her eyes. You're right, I don't have to be here, but I want to be here watching over him with you and making sure that you're alright. Brunette, nothing makes me more happy than being with you. And if watching Tadantsu until he becomes of age and loving him in place of your sister is what you want, then I'd better start practicing my parenting skills, yeah? Because I want to be there, right beside you, every step of the way. I want to do this with you, because being with you literally brightens my world.
Do you really mean that?
Slowly, Kikuri reached for her chin with his index finger and thumb to lightly pull her closer to him. The two locked eyes for a moment and drew ever closer to one another. As they did, their eyes closed and their soft lips connected. Gradually, they transitioned into a hug, and their kiss became a bit more intimate. Brunette moaned lightly as she did. Kikui quickly slid his tongue into her mouth. He wasted no time exploring her. Brunette seemed to welcome it. As this occurred, Brunette began to squirm at the hips. She became a bit lightheaded and was taken by an emotion that's best described as lust. She continued to kiss Kikui deeply. With a slight pause for air, she removed his hat and lab coat swiftly. And as she did, he removed her goggles and helped her out of her shirt. Kikui lowered Brunette backwards onto the bed, and they paused for a moment, gazing at each other. Are you sure you want to do this, Melissa? He asked before speaking. Burnett smiled lightly and gently placed her hands on his cheeks.
At this very moment, I don't feel sadness or anything like that. I just want you to show me how you feel about me and what you do to me. I feel it inside my gut. And while you are, I want you to whisper it all in my ear. I want you to take me.
She moaned. Bearing a clear erection, Kukui nodded and climbed above Burnett for a moment to kiss her. Then, without a moment's delay, he began to strip her of her clothes and kiss her as he did. Starting from her beautiful, tender lips, he licked his way down her dark caramel body to her breast and paused to kiss and glow on her. As he slowly took her right nipple into his mouth, she moaned loudly and squirmed with pleasure. She forced her arms together out of instinct. This squeezed her breasts together enough for him to fit both her lips into his mouth. After finishing with them, he continued down her bucket to where he reached her navel. He gave it a quick kiss and slowly continued down to arrive at her chair. It was already wet with pre and fresh with anticipation. Kukui did not hesitate. He simply removed the rest of his clothes. His shaft hung before Burnett. She bit her lip lightly and signaled him towards her. He did so, and the two began the forbidden ritual. The next morning, Burnett could be seen sleeping on top of a new Kukui, both covered in a thin sheet. Slowly they began to awake due to the morning sun's light. With a sleepy good morning, Kukui hugged Burnett and lightly kissed her forehead before looking over to his wiggling Pokeball that held Incineroar.
Don't do it, Incineroar. It's way too early for that.
Looking towards Burnett, he found that she was standing in morning stretch. Her beautiful ebony body shone in the light. He paused in dumbfounded shock. There, she noticed his expression and aroused member from underneath the sheets and giggled.
Kai, is that the infamous morning wood? Or are you just happy to see me?
This is all you're doing, yeah? He stated, smiling and standing from the bed. But then Incineroar popped out of his Pokeball in celebration and stretch. Incineroar! They all immediately froze with embarrassment of being nude in front of him. After a few minutes pass, the air begins to calm, and with it, Kukui notices Burnett's mood shifting again.
Trust me, Kai. When I return home with Tarantu, there will be many tears. But for right now, I have to be strong. That's what Tarantu told me, at least before he passed out yesterday.
She said, slowly standing from the bed and lightly placing her hands on Kukui's chest. She began to rest on him for a moment. He slowly brought her into a gentle hug. I got it, Melissa. I know that you'll be able to get through this, he said lightly. She softly agreed with him, but remained in his arms for a few moments more. A few hours passed, and Kukui and Burnett could be seen entering back into Tarantu's infirmary room. To their surprise, they found him smiling and laughing at Mr. Rhymes dancing. The same female doctor from yesterday was seen taking his body readings. Additionally, there was a Gardevoir that seemed to be healing his head.
Mommy, I missed you so much. I missed you too, sweetheart. You have some amazing timing, Dr. Burnett. Tarantu, please, give me some time to speak with the doctor over there,
she said, kissing his forehead. Tarantu giggled and smiled. As he did, he walked over towards Kukui curiously.
Kai, you can take this time to meet Tarantu. He's a big fan of Pokemon. You can use the rooftop. It serves as a recovery station for those being treated here. You're welcome to it, along with your Pokemon,
Dr. Joy mentioned. Kukui nodded and took Tarantu outside the room with him. As they did, the air between Dr. Burnett and Dr. Joy became very serious.
Please, don't spare me on the details about Tarantu. Young Tarantu has indeed developed PTSD from the hair trauma that he experienced during the incident. From what we know, his deceased father, Shiro, slammed the child's head into some form of drywall. This caused him to experience a bit of trauma to the interior region of his brain. But like I mentioned yesterday, thanks to the Gardevoir here, we were able to control the seizures that he was experiencing on arrival. There are no longer any signs of them occurring anytime soon. However, we feel that his memories will return to him, at least later on in his life, in the form of episodes. But based on the nature of his situation, they'll most likely cause him shock, and worst case scenario, send him into a coma.
A few moments later, Tarantu and Kukui could be seen arriving on the rooftop of the hospital. Tarantu seemed shocked at how high up they were. Slowly, Tarantu approached Kai, and this caught him a bit off guard. Tarantu seemed to examine Kukui before he spoke.
My name is Tarantu Burnett. It's nice to meet you, mister.
Kukui appeared a bit caught off guard by Tarantu's directness.
My name is Kai Kukui. It's nice to meet you, Tarantu,
he said, shaking Tarantu's little hand.
Say, Tarantu, you like Pokemon, yeah?
Tarantu excitedly nodded his head and asked if he had one. Kai smiled and quickly released his finger with his Pokeball. As soon as the light from the ball had faded, Incineroar could be seen flexing its muscles. But he stopped and noticed Tarantu. Incineroar approached the boy and examined him carefully. Tarantu did the same to Incineroar in a way that almost seemed like mimicking it. He laughed playfully and wore a complete smile of innocence on his face. As Kai watched with a warm smile on his face, he was soon interrupted by a phone call by Burnett. He immediately answered and stepped a tad bit away from Tarantu and Incineroar to answer.
How did he go? I understand. He seems perfectly fine though, and getting along with Incineroar is surprisingly quick,
he said, looking backwards towards Incineroar giving Tarantu a piggyback ride. Kai smiled at that. Kukui quickly responded to her by asking if she wanted to move in with him on Melee Island. Tempted by the thought though, she declined, and told him that she needed time to get used to not having her sister around and essentially raising a child on her own. Kai didn't press her anymore. He simply told her that he'd be there for her when she needed him. She thanked Kai and told him to meet her back in the hospital room.
I've already signed his papers, so tomorrow morning he'll be coming back with us to the Alola and living with me on Alola Island.
Bright and early that next day, after picking up Tarantu from the hospital, Kai and Melissa are seen headed back to the Alola. On the plane, Tarantu sat between them and seemed full of energy. Burnett couldn't seem to keep herself from occasionally tearing up, from both the relief of him being safe, but also the sorrow from her sister's murder. Even so, she kept pushing hard to remain strong in front of Tarantu.
I know that a lot of things might seem confusing right now, but I promise that it'll all make sense someday,
she said, lightly rubbing his head and kissing him on the forehead. Tarantu giggled a bit, then smiled widely. When they finally arrived back home, Kukui stayed with Burnett for just a while longer, just to help her get settled at home and make sure that the apartment compensated for Tarantu. Once that was done though, Burnett asked to be alone with Tarantu for a while. All the while, an odd aura loomed over them.